He posted a notice for a ranch cook. A single widow with children showed up, changing everything. The notice had been tacked crooked on the frost-bitten post outside Mason Creek's trading hall, its corners stiff with ice. Its ink bled slightly from last night's snow. Wanted, a cook for winter, room, board, and honest wages. Jonas Hale, Northridge Ranch. Jonas hadn't meant for the town to look at him the way they did, as if a man posting for a cook in the dead of winter carried some hidden sorrow the rest of them weren't brave enough to name. But the truth was simpler, quieter. He needed help. The ranch needed hands. And winter needed company. That morning, the cold was a living thing, breathing slow against the land. Snow rolled like pale dunes across the valley. The air tasted of iron and pine sap. Jonas stepped out of the barn, gloves stiff, breath rising like smoke. The world felt emptier this year. Too wide, too silent. He adjusted the scarf around his neck, one his late sister had knitted, threads fraying but holding on, and walked toward the porch. The boards beneath his boots creaked in that long, familiar winter way, wood exhausted from holding up a lone man for too many years. He had coffee waiting inside. Instead, he stopped at the top step. A wagon approached down the ridgeline. It came slow, wheels crunching through frozen ruts, the mule's hooves sinking into snowdrifts that swallowed sound. A woman held the reins, a widow by the look of her black shawl. 3 children sat bundled behind her, their shapes small and uncertain under layers patched more with hope than cloth. Jonas felt his breath catch. This wasn't right. He'd asked for a cook. Not this. Not a whole life arriving at his doorstep. The wagon halted near the porch. The woman didn't speak at first. She simply looked at him the way winter looks at a man who has tried too long to live alone. Quiet, assessing, a touch forgiving. Then she climbed down, boots sinking into the snow. Up close, she looked young, early 30s maybe, but winter had left its handwriting on her. Pale cheeks wind-burned raw, eyes that carried fires long tended, shoulders that had learned to bear weight without complaint. Snow melted against the tips of her lashes. She cleared her throat. "Sir, I'm Clara Dawson." Her voice was soft but steady, shaped by someone who'd been forced to speak strength even when she didn't feel it. "I heard you posted for a cook." Jonas opened his mouth, but the words snagged. Her children climbed down, 2 boys, 1 girl, bundled so tight they looked like small moving quilts. The youngest held a burlap sack that clinked with something metallic, maybe pots, maybe keepsakes. The oldest boy stood near his mother, chin lifted in a brave sort of way. Jonas forced his voice steady. I did, but I wasn't expectin'." "A family?" Clara finished, not flinching. He nodded. She swallowed once, hands tightening on her shawl. "My husband passed 6 months ago. We stayed as long as we could with his brother's people. But winter, well, it's kinder to some than others. They asked us to move on." She lifted her chin, a small, quiet rebellion. "I work hard. I don't ask charity. We can sleep in the barn if needed. But my children need warmth. If you'll have us, I can cook, mend, wash, and work the kitchen from dawn to night." The wind pushed between them then, cold enough to sting, cold enough to decide things for a man. Jonas looked at the 3 children. The smallest girl was shivering, fingers tucked into her sleeves. The older boy watched Jonas like a hawk, measuring him, ready to hate him if he gave cause. Then Jonas looked back at Clara. And winter shifted, just slightly, just enough for something warm to pulse under his ribs. He stepped down from the porch. "You'll stay in the house," he said, his voice lower than before. "All of you. Barn's no place for children." Clara's breath hitched. But not from cold. She nodded, almost too quickly. Jonas gestured toward the door. "Come in. Warm up. We'll talk details after." The family stepped inside, boots dripping meltwater onto the floorboards. Jonas closed the door behind them, sealing in a pocket of warmth that felt different suddenly, like the house had inhaled for the first time in years. Clara stood near the hearth, watching the flames brighten as Jonas stoked them higher. Her children hovered close, cautious, taking in the sparse room. 1 table, 2 chairs, A cot tucked against the wall, a stove whose belly glowed red. "This place is small," Jonas murmured. Clara shook her head. "Small is fine. Small can be safe." Safe. The word felt like a forgotten language. Outside, snow thickened, drifting against the windows like slow, white tides. The ranch, accustomed to winter silence, now held new breaths, new heartbeats. Jonas stood there, unsure what exactly had just changed, only that something had. Something quiet. Something irreversible. Clara Dawson had arrived with winter clinging to her boots. And winter, somehow, suddenly felt warmer. They ate like people who had not trusted a hot meal in a long while, slow, reverent, the way hands find rhythm with spoons that do not judge. Clara moved around the tiny kitchen with quiet competence, a steady hand ladling stew, a small thief of warmth who returned it to the table. The children watched her the way plants watch for sun. The youngest, May, reached out once and let her fingers curl against the edge of Clara's sleeve, then pulled back as if the touch might melt. Jonas watched them, watched Clara more carefully than he'd watched anything in the last 5 winters. She didn't chatter. She answered only when spoken to. There was a deliberate economy to how she used words, as if each one had to survive harsh weather to be worthy of leaving her mouth. After supper, when the children were settled under a patchwork quilt Jonas hadn't seen moved in months, he and Clara sat opposite one another, the stove between them simmering like the belly of a living hot thing. Snow hit the windows in regular beats, soft thumps that made the house breathe. "You've been east long?" Jonas asked, filling the silence with something small. Clara's fingers traced the rim of her cup. "Near the river," she said. "We moved with the mill work until my husband. He took ill. The mill let us go. Work's scarce where the boards are frozen and the men are needed for lumber rather than families." Jonas nodded. He understood the economy of loss. Out here it had a sound, the click of boot heels walking away from a door, the measured slide of a chair pushed back for the last time. "What can you cook?" he asked, curious despite himself. She smiled then, a quick, private thing that showed a flicker of bare teeth and something gentler. "What I learnt from my mother," she said. "Soup thick enough to mend a man, bread that will hold a pocket of butter without giving up, pudding stuffed with whatever keeps, a secret of molasses and raisins." Her voice was steady, but there was a hunger there too, not for food, more like a hunger for a place that remembered names. Jonas felt an old memory loosen, his sister's hand pressing dough into his palms years ago, the smell of yeast that could make a man believe in small miracles. He cleared his throat. "We're set then. You start tomorrow." Winter folded itself around that decision like a shawl. They rose that evening to the sound of the wind picking up, an animal stirring in its sleep. Jonas covered the children with an extra blanket and watched the slow, even rise and fall of their chests until sleep smoothed the line of their faces. Clara sat by the hearth a while longer, her hands warm on a tin cup, as if memorizing the way the light traveled across the room. Days fell into a pattern faster than Jonas expected. Clara's cooking filled spaces, literal and otherwise. Her bread crusted gold on the stove shelf, the stew boiled low and fragrant, and little gestures braided themselves into routine, the way she swept salt from the threshold in a tidy path, the way she mended socks while talking to the children about small towns she'd known, the way she hummed at dawn like anyone could store a song against winter. Jonas found himself waking earlier to the smell of coffee and the hiss of the stove. He found the kitchen table set without asking. He found the children's laughter, soft and surprised, leaking into rooms that had once kept the echoes of his solitary footsteps. But winter is a patient thing. It keeps score in small, slow ways. Not everyone in town found the new arrangement easy. Rumor is an animal that grows hungry in the dark. By the second week, a man from the co-op stopped by, an informal sort of vigilance, more looking than accusation, his cap rim frosted with ice. "You takin' in city folk?" he asked, voice flat as a packed trail. "They were passing," Jonas said. "Needed work, needed shelter. I pay fair." The man didn't press. He just let his stare sit there a while, heavy and expectant, as if waiting for a crack. Then he moved off, leaving questions like footprints. A note arrived a few days later. No signature. A single line scrawled in careful ink and left pinned to the same post where Jonas had posted the notice. "Be careful who you bring into town." The letters were neat, the message cold. Clara read it and folded it without a tremor, tucking it into her pocket as if it were only a scrap. That night, after the children slept, she set the note on the table between them and poured 2 cups of tea. The lamplight made the steam silver, and for the first time in the week since she'd arrived, her face seemed to measure the warmth against something else. "You won't leave," Jonas said quietly, the sentence an offering and a question. Clara looked at him for a long time, the stoic lines in her face softening. "I won't run," she said. "Not with them." Jonas watched her, the weight of that promise settling into his chest like a small, sure stone. He wanted to ask where they would go if the town turned, if hunger found mouths that used words like weapons. He wanted to ask whether she had kin beyond the valley. He wanted to know what ghosts she kept tucked in the folds of her shawl. Instead, he asked something smaller. "Do you miss him?" It was not a cruel question. It was one born of the way winter makes men and women honest. Clara's hand tightened around her cup. "Every day," she said. "But missing is different from stopping. I carry it. I don't let it tilt the day." She said it without preaching, just fact. The way someone would say the weather, true, unavoidable, something to plan around. And so they moved forward, 2 people with histories that smelled like smoke and rain, learning to build a new grammar for living in a house that had once been a shrine to solitude. Snow rose higher that week. The children fashioned paltry sleds from broken crates and hauled them down the shallow hill behind the barn, their shouts muffled by winter's breath. Clara taught May to braid wool, her fingers patient and sure, and the oldest, Tommy, learned the geometry of stacking wood so the burn would last through a night of starless cold. But Jeremiah Lyle, owner of the general store and keeper of small resentments, stayed a problem. He had a way of being close-lipped and warm only to those whose names he'd given water credit. When he passed the ranch, his stare grazed the picket, lingered on a child's mitten, hung to dry, and the rest of it lingered like fog. "They're outsiders," he said loud enough for Jonas to hear across the road one afternoon. "Town's tight enough. We don't need more mouths we haven't seen in spring." Jonas didn't answer then. He had learned not to feed cold words with heat. But that night, when wind clawed at the shutters and snow writhed in white sheets across the field, Jonas stood in the doorway and watched Clara tuck May beneath the quilt. He felt something like ownership, not selfish but protective, coil tight in his chest. Winter had left its mark on everyone in that valley, in different forms, on the faces at the co-op, in the lines etched around Jeremiah's eyes, in the cautious kindness the town offered on Sundays. Clara's arrival had changed an equation. It had made a small, slow interior revolution. Outside, the storm sharpened. Snow began to fall harder, thicker, impatient, erasing tracks as quickly as they were made. The world went white and smaller, and the ranch, warm, lit from within, became a beacon against it. Jonas closed the door, latched it, and set the bolt with a hand that was steady now for 2 reasons. The weather required it, and something else did too. Something he could not yet name, but that felt, more and more, like belonging. The storm did not ease by morning. It pressed harder, wind dragging long icy claws across the roof, snow piling against the windows until the world outside blurred to a pale, endless hush. Jonas woke before dawn, though the house still slept. The quiet inside felt different now. Not the lonely kind that used to echo through his bones. This was warmer, thicker, holding breath and life in its seams. He stepped into the main room, boots soft on the floorboards. The stove still held a faint orange glow. Clara must have fed it during the night. She always rose at least once to check on the fire, to make sure cold never reached the children. Jonas opened the door to add more wood, then paused. Clara was already there. She sat close to the stove, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, hair half fallen from its braid. Her hands were folded in her lap. She wasn't tending the fire. She was watching it, eyes fixed on the shifting glow like someone measuring thoughts she hadn't spoken aloud. She didn't startle when he stepped closer. "I heard the wind," she murmured. Jonas nodded. He took the seat beside her, leaving a respectful inch of space. Heat brushed both their knees. "You slept at all?" he asked. "A little." She exhaled slowly. "Storms. They unsettle me. They remind me how small we are under things we can't control." He studied her profile, her stillness, the sharp line of her cheekbone in the firelight. "If there's anything you need—" She gave a faint, weary smile. "You've given more than enough already." Silence nestled between them, not awkward, just waiting. The fire cracked, and the house creaked under the weight of snow. Somewhere in the loft, Tommy shifted in sleep. Clara's shoulders dropped as though releasing a long-held breath. "Jonas," she whispered, voice barely above the rumble of wind, "I don't want to be trouble for you. Not with the town. Not with whoever's watching." Jonas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're not trouble. Folks can talk. Let 'em." His voice came low, steady. "What matters is those 3 kids got a warm place. And you do too." Clara looked at him fully then, eyes steady, searching. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. The look was enough. Before he could say more, a sudden thump shook the porch, a heavy, deliberate sound that cut through the storm like a blade. Clara stiffened. Jonas rose instantly, instinct snapping tight. He crossed the room in 3 steps, pulled the door partially open, and peered out into the white churn. A bundle lay against the porch rail, not tossed, placed. He stepped out, wind slicing across his face. He lifted the bundle. Something metallic clinked inside. Snowflakes hissed against the cloth. Back inside, Clara stood with her hands pressed to her chest, waiting. Jonas unwrapped the bundle on the table. A tin of biscuits, 2 jars of preserves, a small loaf of rye bread wrapped in cotton, and a note. Clara's breath trembled. Jonas opened it. The handwriting was careful, masculine, familiar. For the children. Storms too rough for grudges. Pastor Weller. Clara's lips parted in surprise. She swallowed hard, fingers brushing the edge of the note. Jonas set it down gently. "See," he murmured, "not everyone's set against you." But Clara didn't smile. Her eyes filled with something raw, gratitude mixed with disbelief, as if kindness was a language she hadn't heard in far too long. The children woke soon after, drawn by the smell of bread warming on the stove. May ran to Clara, arms lifted, and Clara bent to sweep her up, pressing a kiss to her cold cheek. For a moment, the storm outside could have been another world entirely. Later, as Jonas pulled on his coat to fix the fence beam that had cracked under wind pressure, Clara touched his arm lightly. "Be careful," she said. It was the first time she'd spoken to him like someone afraid of losing him. Outside, the wind pushed him sideways, snow needling his face. He worked fast, breath steaming in hard bursts. The ranch felt smaller under the winter sky, like the storm had swallowed the horizon whole. As he hammered the new brace into place, something moved at the edge of the property. A dark shape against the pale swell of snow, a man on horseback, watching. Jonas straightened slowly, hand drifting toward the rifle propped against the post. But the rider didn't approach, didn't call out, didn't turn away either. He just watched, face hidden under a hat brim heavy with frost. Then, just as slowly as he'd appeared, he nudged his horse and drifted back into the storm, swallowed by white. Jonas's pulse thudded in his ears. A different kind of cold seeped into him, one not made of winter, but of anticipation. When he returned to the house, snow shaking from his coat in heavy clumps, Clara saw something in his eyes and went still. "What is it?" she whispered. Jonas shut the door tight behind him. "Someone was out there." Clara's face blanched. "From town?" "I don't know." His jaw worked. "Didn't look like anyone local." Silence grew thick again. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. "Jonas, we didn't come here with secrets. But trouble sometimes follows even when we've done nothing to deserve it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever's following, it'll have to get through me first." Clara didn't look away, didn't flinch. She only nodded once, slowly, as if accepting a pact she never asked for but desperately needed. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the house held its warmth tighter. And somewhere between wind and silence, the warning had been given. Winter never brings strangers without reason. By dusk, the storm had settled into a quieter fury, wind no longer clawing, just whispering along the eaves like a warning trying to remember its own name. Jonas kept checking the windows, though frost blurred the world outside into a pale, trembling sheet. Clara moved about the kitchen with purposeful calm, but every now and then her eyes flicked toward the door, toward the dark. The children sensed it too. Tommy sat near the hearth whittling a small block of pine, but his cuts were too cautious, too slow for a boy his age. May held her rag doll with both hands, as if protecting it from something that hadn't entered the house yet, but was already breathing against its walls. Clara finally set her wooden spoon down. "Jonas," she said softly, "whoever that man was, do you think he'll return?" Jonas didn't sugarcoat things. He never had, not even when the truth carried a chill colder than the weather. "Riders don't wander in storms unless they've got reason," he said. And he had reason. Clara pressed her hands together, knuckles blanching. "If it's someone from our past—" "It doesn't matter whose past," Jonas cut in before she spiraled. "He won't get through this family, not now, not while you're under my roof." Something in his voice startled her, firm, steady, almost like a vow. They ate supper quietly, too quietly. Every small sound sharpened. Spoons tapping bowls, wind brushing the windows, the faint crackle of wood settling under its own embers. Jonas sat with his back to the door, body coiled with a readiness he didn't bother hiding. Clara watched him once, just long enough for their eyes to meet, and soften. When the children were finally settled for sleep, Jonas moved to check the latch again. But when he reached for the door, Clara stepped toward him. "Jonas," she whispered, "you're trembling." He hadn't realized he was. Winter sank into a man without asking permission. Sometimes fear did too. Clara reached for his hands, hesitated, then took them, palms rough against her own worn ones. The warmth between them was small but real. "You're not alone anymore," she said. It was a simple thing. But simple things, in winter, were often the strongest. He didn't answer with words. He only nodded, holding her hands a second longer than necessity allowed. Much later, after Clara had gone to bed and the children's breaths filled the house like a soft tide, Jonas kept watch at the table, lamp dimmed low. His rifle lay across his lap. The fire whispered behind him, and then a sound, soft, muted, wrong. Snow crunching under deliberate steps. Jonas rose silently, heart slowing into something dangerous. He moved to the window, wiped a small circle of frost from the glass, and leaned close. A figure stood near the barn, not the rider from before. This one walked, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat, face shadowed beneath a brim. He lifted a lantern, yellow light glowing through the snow like a sick star. Jonas opened the door just a crack. The cold rushed in. "Who's there?" he called, voice low but carrying. The figure moved closer, stopping just beyond the porch light. Snowflakes drifted between them. "You Jonas Hale?" the man asked. Jonas stiffened. "Who's asking?" The stranger exhaled, breath fogging the air. He lowered the lantern slightly, revealing eyes that held the cold too comfortably. "I'm looking for a woman named Clara Dawson," he said, "and her 3 young ones." The wind died. The world narrowed. Jonas's hand slid toward the rifle leaning beside the wall. "And why," Jonas said, voice like flint, "would you be looking for them in a storm like this?" The man didn't smile, didn't blink. "Because," he said quietly, "her husband sent me." Behind Jonas, the house seemed to hold its breath. Clara's footsteps stopping somewhere in the hallway, the children shifting in sleep, the fire shrinking to a single glowing ember. Winter had finally delivered its reason. Jonas didn't breathe at first. The words sat between them like a lit match in a dry field. Clara's husband. Dead 6 months. By her own shaking confession, by the burden she carried in the way her voice thinned whenever she spoke of him. Jonas stepped fully onto the porch, shutting the door behind him so the children wouldn't hear the wind carry pieces of this conversation. "She told me her husband passed," Jonas said, jaw tight. The stranger's eyes flicked once, almost pitying. "Past the law, maybe, past the bottle, but passed from this world? No, sir, Not yet. Jonas felt the cold punch deeper. State your name. The man lowered his lantern. Snow stung his coat, hissed on the metal frame. Elias Marin. I'm her husband's brother. A long pause. Jonas had never met the man, but the shape of him, the tight jaw, the hollowed cheeks, the caution in his stance, felt carved from the same circumstances that shaped Clara. Hunger, winter, long roads that broke more people than they carried. "What do you want with her?" Jonas asked. The lantern light caught Elias's breath as he spoke. "What any kin wants, their own blood back. My brother's alive but broken. After she left, he went half mad looking for the children." A beat. "They belong with family." Jonas said nothing. Snow gathered on his shoulders like judgment. Then Elias continued, softer but heavier. "We didn't cast her out, Jonas Hale. She ran, after a fight, after he struck her." Elias's throat worked. "I'm not excusing him. He was sick with grief, drink, winter, but he never meant for them to vanish, and he's been searching since." Behind Jonas, the door opened just a sliver. "Elias?" Clara's voice, barely audible, barely steady. Jonas turned. She stood in the doorway, shawl pulled tight, hair loose around her face. Her eyes had gone dark with old fear, not of Elias himself, but of the memories he dragged behind him like sleet. Elias lowered the lantern fully now, revealing exhaustion carved deep. "Clara," he breathed. "Thank God. I thought you'd frozen out there somewhere." She stepped onto the porch, but slowly, like the boards might give way. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Someone had to." Elias looked at her with something that wasn't anger, just responsibility worn thin. "Clara, he's not well. He needs help. And those children need family, not charity from strangers." Jonas felt that, sharp, unfair. Clara flinched as if struck, and then her chin lifted, low, trembling, but unbroken. "Elias, family doesn't hurt," she said quietly. "Family doesn't drive fists into walls and blame the woman closest when winter eats the crops. Family doesn't leave bruises to explain away to children." Her hands shook. "Your brother lost himself long before I ran, and I ran because staying was killing us." Elias swallowed hard. "Clara, he's changed. He's sober now, praying regular. He knows what he did." "I know too," Clara whispered. Snow drifted between them in thin, delicate sheets, so soft, so deceptive. Elias finally met Jonas's eyes. "You can't keep her here. Folks are already talking, and if the law hears she fled her husband—" Jonas stepped forward. "She's safe in my home," he said, voice low. "Storm or no storm, law or no law." Elias studied him, really studied him, for the first time. The rifle leaning by the door, the warmth spilling from the house behind him, the quiet conviction in Jonas's posture. Then he turned back to Clara. "You mean to stay?" he asked. Clara looked down, then up again, slowly, painfully, but with a certainty that made Jonas feel the floor steady beneath them. "I mean to raise my children where winter doesn't have hands," she said. "I mean to build something that doesn't bruise." Elias's breath trembled out. He nodded once. Just once, shoulders sagging under the weight of something finally released. "I'll tell him you're alive," he murmured, "and safe." A pause. "He'll want to come, Clara, but I'll try to stop him." Clara closed her eyes. "Thank you." Elias stepped back into the storm. "I won't trouble you again," he said to Jonas. "Take care of them." Jonas nodded, something fierce and wordless rising behind his ribs. When Elias disappeared into the white, Clara stood there, shaking. Not from cold, but from a truth finally spoken aloud. Jonas reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Inside, the house still held warmth, held light, held the fragile beginning of something that had outlived the storm. Winter, for the first time, felt like it might break, not them,